Welcome to the Awakened Goddess Show, your source for inspiration, wisdom, and personal discovery. The place to learn from a diverse mix of mentors, metaphysical experts, spiritual leaders, and best-selling authors from around the world. I'm Angela Wilkinson, intuitive coach and founder of the Awakened Goddess Academy. Join me as I explore the minds of my masterful guests while they share powerful insights and easy-to-use tools you can start using right away. Now, let's tap into the energy of the Awakened Goddess and be enlightened by today's guest. Jennifer Posada is a beloved and world-renowned oracle, teacher, author, sound healer, and the founder of the Oracle School and the Orgasmic Woman Project. The sacred traditions that she teaches are unbelievably potent and otherwise lost practices that include the arts of bliss and pleasure as a way of life. Jennifer is the author of The Oracle Within, Living the Intuitive Life, and the creator of the sound healing CD, Soul Sounds, used by healing practitioners around the world. Now let's welcome Jennifer to the show. Welcome to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show, where we co-create powerful conscious conversations on the leading edge. Today I have Jennifer joining us to talk about following the pulse, what it means to be intuitively sexual, and how to explore the sexual priestess within. So welcome, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you so much, Angela. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so I've heard wonderful things about you. One of the past guests that I interviewed on the show, Sarah Love, she just loves your work, and she's like, "Oh my
Oh,
gosh, you have to have Jennifer on your show." So
oh,
I'm really excited to see where this goes today and learn more about you and your work. So let's
oh.
go, shall we?
Yes, let's do. Thank you, Angela. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. Um, so one thing I've noticed about you is your energy is very fun and playful and childlike.
Oh.
And there is a story behind this, I understand. You were born as a tulku, is that right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell us what that is and what it was like growing up for you.
Hmm. Thanks, Angela. I love talking about that because it says so much about just why I talk about what I talk about even. And I also want to say, Angela, you strike me exactly the same way.
No.
I love your wonderful, playful energy, and it's something that made me look so forward to this interview. So, playful, warm, childlike in the best way. I think these are a lot of the qualities that are the hallmark of joyful moments or a joyful life. And I definitely don't think they're the only signs of a good, rich life. All of the experiences we have their place, but it's a gift. And so for me, as a child, I came into this world different, not different in essence in terms of we all have these incredible gifts, but I was really aware of many of them, and I didn't know that was different. I thought that was just, how we are. And slowly I started to realize that, not everybody remembered their past lives, many of their past lives, and had this mystical connection to sort of this sense of ongoing soul journey, which is really a beautifully precious thing to have. I was able to communicate with beings, and I didn't think that was unusual. I could see colors and associate them with how someone was feeling or whether they were feeling well or ill. I always like to tell the story that my mom would let me pick the babysitters from a distance based on who seemed to be in the best mood that day or who was most well. This one was when I was really small as well. And so a lot of these gifts are beautiful. I mean, we think of them as sort of, the magical child, the quintessential magical child, although we're all that magical child, obviously. But those were special gifts. But definitely the best thing, by far, was this sense that everything was sacred, everything around me, everyone around me, and that meant that my sense of self was this most intimate form of that sacredness or that love. And so I felt this natural sense of self-love. And it wasn't something I had to push. It sort of bubbled out of me. You know, I'd write little notes like, I love myself. And I knew I was talking about this. I mean, it's so hard to even put words on now after years of trying to talk about it, but this warm, wonderful feeling of love inside of me, and that I belonged in all of this love all around me. And this is even though I had some pretty terrible childhood experiences, I still knew love was there. And that love and that self-love really carried me a lot and has carried me a lot through my life. And so, you know, my memories from past lives as an oracle or a nymph or a sibyl or a priestess are a huge part of everything that I share. But really, it's about when I was a child noticing that most of the world didn't seem to have that feeling of love and sacredness, you know, around them or inside of them. And even the adults that were teaching me some important things didn't have that feeling necessarily. And so I knew what I was meant to share and do in the world. And that's been a great gift too.
Well, and that's incredible to come in knowing your purpose and knowing it so clearly. And I love that hearing about your experience as a child and having that self-love and feeling embodied in that because oh my gosh, imagine what it would be like if we all came in that way.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And I'm so glad you said that because that's a lot of what I feel when people come together and remember, you know, and it doesn't matter whether it's because we're at a live band is playing and everybody's bouncing and dancing and I look around and they all look childlike. They all
Mm.
look playful. And even if they had a hard day or a hard week or they're going through a hard time in their life, in that moment, everyone's bouncing at the same, you know, level. And everyone's got this sheer 5-year-old joy look on their face, you know, if the song is really good and the people are really feeling it.
Hmm.
And I also feel that, of course, when I'm teaching a course or a group of us go into a beautiful place of remembering together. So we tap back into that. And the more we tap back into it, the more it becomes the flow of our lives and even through the tough times as well. And so, yeah, exactly. We're sort of leaning more toward what the world would be like if we all remembered,
Hmm.
like if we had come in remembering.
Hmm. And one of the things, part of your bio, I love it. You started by saying that you are a living legend. You're a cosmic powerhouse, a sheer force of nature, and that um, you feel like you are here to show us that we are all this.
Mm.
And I love that. It's like reminding us what we truly are or who we truly are, that we do have that power.
Yeah, I that's my great passion. I mean, I have many passions, but right there at the core, if we can all remember as often as possible that we are that radiant and good and whole, even though things in this world or experiences in this world may not have given us that message or may have given us the exact opposite message, that we can tap back into that beautiful glowing essence that we are. You know, that the more of everything moves and shifts in our lives in a way that makes us feel supported, in a way that makes us feel guided from within, in a way that makes us feel juicy and flowing with life force and vital and connected, you know, connected to our deeper sense of self, connected to the earth, connected to each other in
Hmm.
the ways that are most nourishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that there seems, at least from my observance, that it seems like a lot of us have disconnected from our own truest, deepest desires. And I'm wondering if, because I know that the work that you do is very sensual and sexual, and that definitely relates to desire. And I'm wondering if you have noticed that as well.
Oh, definitely. And not only that, but I also think that not only do we live in a world and in a time where it's not a message that we get that our desires are all that important, but even some very well meaning spiritual traditions share that desire is, you know, I don't know, the root of all evil, for instance, and the root of all suffering. And there is some wisdom to that idea at a certain level. And I understand where it's coming from, but it's really missing the hugeness of the fact that desire is actually what makes the ripples in the ocean of the universe happen.
Mm-hmm.
Desire, that movement can come from this incredible place inside of us that is the reason why creation ever happened. I see the universe as being, and creation as being, an outcome of the universe making love to itself, because the universe is in love with itself. And now I know that sounds incredibly grand and so beautiful, but then, also awful things happen. So how to reconcile all of that is something else that I talk about. But if you take for a moment the universe as a place where, it's love is making love to itself and all of that, the drive inside of us, that desire, that call, that pull, and knowing when it comes from that deep place is what makes magic happen. It is so beautiful. And if we knew and if we understood, we could have more clarity about the desires that actually draw us away from deeper feeling, the desires that are just a distraction, but we don't feel good afterward. Right. And that it's not about feeling ashamed of that either. I mean, that has its wisdom. But when we can really feel like what I call the pulse and where it's drawing us, or the moments where we think, I don't know where my pulse is right now, I'm going to go home, take a nap, and feel this out tomorrow. It's not about having to have every answer every second. A lot of times it's about giving ourselves space. But those desires, I can tell a short story about it, or we can move on to other questions, because I can tell we're going to have a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Well, I want to find out, I want to learn more about the pulse when you're talking about follow the pulse.
Yeah.
I have a sneaking suspicion what that is, but I would love to hear from your words.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you probably do know exactly what I'm talking about. So the essence of explaining, what the pulse is about is incredibly simple. And then the coming to feel it and check in on it and then getting to know it better is where the real art is. But, the art within each one of us, it's different for everybody, but you can think of the pulse like the pulse of your life force. So when it's strong, it may not always feel like boom, 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 like a pulse, just like you can't always hear your heartbeat, but it's always pulsing. So it's like the heartbeat of our life force. It's the heartbeat of our knowing. And so when you feel the pulse more, that might, for some people, mean feeling like a pulse, like a pulsing rhythm. But typically it will feel just like an energy welling up, like a yes. And we can practice following the pulse in smaller, simpler ways that also add up before we're like, am I feeling the pulse about buying that house or not? And we get nervous. And, I understand, I talk and teach so much about intuition. I'm so aware of the nuances of how to trust and when to trust and all those feelings that come up for people. But the thing about the pulse is that once you start to recognize where you feel it more, it just guides you naturally. You just know what you feel more drawn to or when you need space and time, and you're more likely to honor that. And the way that you make choices changes because it's not how we were taught to live. We were taught to live, maybe we had certain free time. I mean, there was recess where you could play, and then that was over. And then, wait until lunch to be hungry, and then, wait to go to the bathroom until you're allowed to. So that was sort of removed from our environment. We were told to just get strong and force yourself through 9 to 5 or whatever else you have to. And sometimes we do have to really get through something. I absolutely understand. But if we know that the pulse counts and it matters, oh, wow. I mean, even as we start to just make a little space for that to matter more, it is ready to show us, and then things start to align differently. And life becomes, except for the times where we really need to have the challenging experiences for growth, life becomes so much more organic feeling. The way we were it's much more in alignment also with our bodies and our physiology so that things move in a way that's more effortless. And it's a joy. It is how we were designed to function. It's how animals were designed to function. We are animals, is to be able to move with that flow, follow that pulse of instinct and intuition and life force, and to have that life force pulsing continuously. And supporting us and nourishing us. And that's something we need very much.
Yeah, and I love how you talk about it. And following my intuition, or as you call it, the pulse, really stepping into that and trusting that I'm always guided has really freed up my mind. Uh, it's really allowed me to just have a better relationship with myself and have that trust that I always will know exactly where to go whenever, and it's such a wonderful way to live, living fully in the present moment, and just stepping into that next now.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And even when I've gone through such challenges and the pulse just told me, lay there and breathe, just breathe in and out, or go down that dark passageway all the way, even though you're afraid, or don't go down there right now. Just let yourself lay back with a fuzzy blanket and relax, so that it's not like the pulse is only there when we're so thriving and everything is aligned and the synchronicities are happening. That's great. That's wonderful. I love that. And it's so supportive. But knowing it's there through the challenging times and not just when things feel grand helps weave together our sense of wholeness and our fuller sense of self-love, that it's okay when we're curled up on the couch covered in the fuzzy blanket, and that doesn't have to be away from our pulse, even if we're hoping that that passes soon and don't really want to be in that position.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm curious as we're talking about the pulse and intuition, what does it mean to be intuitively sexual?
Oh, yeah. Well, so imagine for a moment that you didn't have something you had to do as soon as you woke up in the morning. And if you have, let's say, something that makes it difficult waking up in the morning, like a chronic pain issue or anything like that, imagine that's gone. And imagine that there's time just stretching out in front of you, nothing standing in your way. And you could just explore your day in this wide open way. You could slowly make a cup of tea. You could think about what you want for breakfast, and then maybe you could make it happen. Or maybe you end up, laughing in your pajamas and having your brunch at lunchtime. And who knows what could happen next. But it would become what life could be, which is this very exploratory, supported, nourished experience. And we'd get to notice what we're actually enjoying and not enjoying rather than having to propel ourselves into what we think we have to do right then. Understandably, the world is not structured right now in a way that supports us in just being wide open in most cases to what might come next. I mean, I truly understand that. But if you imagine for a moment how your skills around what you wanted to lean into, right, following the pulse or not, versus what you wanted to shy away from when you felt done with something, your food, a conversation when you didn't. And then imagine being able to apply all of that. Imagine being so at home in your body and in your animal body that you could feel when you wanted to reach for someone and how you wanted to move your body and how you wanted to show them something or respond to them, and you could be fully saturated. I mean, I'm having to close my eyes, as those of you watching video can see, just to even go to that level. And there would be so much less doubt. There wouldn't be this sense of having to, for anyone who feels this way, having to sort of perform or am I doing this right or whatever. There's just you trusting your body. And the way that that then enhances a sexual encounter with another person is incredible. We weren't necessarily taught that sexuality is this incredibly fluid, very natural thing that you get shown from within.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of like heard things on the playground, or maybe we asked some adults, maybe we got weird information, maybe we didn't, but we've certainly gotten shaming messages here or there, and maybe we got a lot of them. Maybe we had traumatic sexual experiences. So being able to feel that we could just truly come to know our body, our intuition, and have that flow as one from a deep place in connection with ourselves or another human being, or maybe other human beings if you're wild and going there, then, that's just not. And I don't mean it's wild to be with more than one human being. I just meant
Right.
maybe there's more than one person in the room. I try to exclude no one because I
Right.
know there are people out there who are thinking, I have two partners. But anyway, I just really I think some people might find that a little scary because and some people are thinking, oh, that's fantastic. I want to feel that way more and more, or I already do feel that way sometimes. But it's a lot of times as well because we haven't necessarily factored in that feeling safe and at home in our bodies is important in sexuality. And I know some people have,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not something we get taught. Like,
Right.
it matters that you feel safe and relaxed. And even if you also feel risk taking and excited at the same time, it matters that you're able to feel a sense of home in your own body. And then when you extend from that place in a sexual encounter, it's incredible. And that's really, I know we're going to go here, but what the sexual priestesses were able to do in being able to assist people in remembering that they are love.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're coming from that deep place inside, you're coming from your essence, and then you're sharing that in a body with another person or yourself. How amazing is that? I mean, how healing and beautiful is that?
It is. And it's incredibly both sensual and expanding
Mm,
because, as you're talking and you're talking about the messages that we get, there is shame and there's a lot of body issue stuff that can
yeah,
come with that. And, if we haven't really claimed who we are, we haven't really embodied our true essence, it's like it feels really uncomfortable, or it
yeah,
can feel really
yeah,
intensely comfortable to really be seen by another person,
yeah.
especially in that intimate, full naked
Oh, yeah,
state. You're
yeah,
like completely open. And
yeah,
so, yeah, I mean, to be able to step into that incredible beauty and intimacy um, and experience that with someone is so divine.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it used to be in ancient times not just part of spirituality. It was, and again, sexuality, or well, I haven't said this yet, but it wasn't necessarily perceived as just an act that happened, while lying down and mostly involved genitals. But this energy, this beautiful, loving energy that's a part of all of us, and the many ways that can be experienced, was central to what was understood as sacred. It was this sharing of love. And, that would include even something like the love that can well up inside of you and the connection you feel walking by a beautiful stream in the spring and everything smells warm and you feel like a nymph, and it's just incredible. And that's actually one of the big ways people can kind of bridge into then ever thinking of sharing that with another person, is just really being able to feel it and have it feel worth doing that vulnerability, making those steps toward vulnerability for. Because if it feels good enough and it feels safe enough and worthwhile enough, then we want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Then if discomforting feelings come up, we're willing to say, this is worth it. I want to go that extra mile. But yeah, I just definitely think that it's just one of the hugest missing pieces, even though I'm so glad sacred sexuality is coming back into the picture and into the metaphysical picture. Those who are interested in it are really leaning in, but it's still something to sort of incorporate rather than something that belongs in a central place in that discussion, as like oh, of course,
Mm-hmm.
sacred sexuality.
Right. Yeah, it seems like it's definitely been lost. It's been this lost art form. I remember the first time I came across like Tantra work. And this was after I had done training as a therapist and like training to be a sex therapist. But talking about it is one thing, but
Yes.
embodying it and experiencing it is a whole nother thing. And
Yeah.
so I was doing like the simple exercises of looking into like eye gazing and the partner breathing, I can't remember exactly what it was, like circular breathing, or I can't remember exactly what it was called, but wow, there was like so much incredible power there that is so untapped that and I really want to talk about how that energy can help us manifest, because that
Yeah.
sacred power is there. And in our second chakra, in the sacral chakra, we hold all of that energy. So I would
Yeah.
love to talk about that as well.
Oh, great. Oh, good. Well, so something that you said, Angela, brought up a perfect kind of an example. You were talking about how eye gazing or breathing, some of those practices that don't even necessarily fit into what some people would think of as a sexual act, because we're usually thinking of overtly sexual acts
Mm-hmm.
rather than the energy or any energy exchange that may or may not be classified as overtly sexual. But what that took me back to is we've all had some experience where we had this kiss with somebody, or many of us have had this experience, or holding hands, or a look that was just, it gives me chills just to think about it, even though I don't have a specific memory that I'm holding right now. It's just so potent. And some of those experiences, like a kiss, maybe, were so rich that the maybe experiences with other people where we were full on engaging in what we would define as sex didn't compare
Right.
to that kiss or or that one encounter or that one lover or that one that moment, that glance that was so rich. And we have that potential to feel that all the time. And I know even that can be sort of scary because it's like, well, first of all, what if that's too much? It can feel like that. And second of all, what about the hard stuff? Is there no room for the hard times? So I don't literally mean needing to feel exactly like that all the time with no variation. What I mean is that richness
Mm-hmm.
of being that connected and absorbed and present because it feels that beautiful to be that present is possible for us. And it does draw from these wells inside of us that a lot of things don't. Not just sexuality, but what makes us feel the pulse draws up our deeper essence and lets that come forward more and all the gifts that come with it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're sort of vibrating at our deeper essence level, or it's we're sort of singing it out vibrationally, right? I mean,
Right.
we truly are vibration. We are vibrating all the time. Our emotions, thoughts, intentions, all of it we are like a song. And the song that our presence sings shifts. And what is drawn and who and what is drawn to that song that we're putting out also is very radically shifts. And that doesn't mean that, I should quickly say that I always say there are two levels of manifestation. Certainly there are more, but one level is conscious manifestation. It's, I really want to meet someone. And then there's soul level manifestation. And that's more along the lines of, at a level I may or may not be aware of, my soul knows that it's important that I wait a year to meet someone
Mm-hmm.
because I'm going to have these great experiences in this year that are going to make that relationship so much better when it comes. So we can kind of know that at some level we're always perfect manifestors because our souls, at times that we're like, I didn't manifest this, our souls may be bringing forward something that needs to happen that we don't totally understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay if we want to rebel against it. And because that has beauty and power too, that can be where we break free and use our conscious mind to help shift things. It can be a force of change, and that's important too. But manifestation, when we feel like we can say yes to more of who we truly are, discover, explore, and play with more of who we truly are at this very deep, deep level, it allows us to begin to consciously create from that place, which then in tandem with our soul manifestation can create some really beautiful things in our lives. And it really helps us to know that we're deserving.
Mm-hmm.
When we're having experiences that affirm that we are good and whole in some way, it really sends this message not only to our conscious self, but our subconscious self, that can sometimes run the show and is very dependent on experiences we had growing up. It also gets the message. Our whole being gets the message. And as we feel more deserving, we're more open to opportunities that could give us the kind of blessings or abundance or relationships or whatever that we are really yearning for on that conscious level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like it's just such an untapped power that we have.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, have you ever heard about like intention setting? This is a little random, but intention setting um, at the time of orgasm to like amplify your intention?
Yeah, I absolutely have. And yeah, not at all strange to me.
Yeah.
So when we're building sexual energy, and, again, that could just be sort of maybe if you're out in nature, it feels like life force or the pulse or an energy that feels like we're letting energy flow through us the way that we were more designed to, but weren't exactly taught to at all. And so even that can be a positive time for setting intentions or deepening intentions. The whole of ourselves, once again, is sort of listening and participatory. The nourishing energy is there to support it. So then when you bring in something like, let's talk about overt sexuality, like having a state of sexual pleasure, even without orgasm, let's say at that moment or prior to orgasm, you are building up this tremendous, beautiful, amazing energy. I mean, I know that if we have some healing to do in our bodies, or if we've had an injury or nerve injury, absolutely there may be some cases where this isn't the case, or where some healing is required before it would be. But for most people, if you compare touching maybe your genitals compared to touching your elbow, it's a whole different world of sensation.
Mm-hmm.
Right there is the sign within our very physiology that we have this amazing sensitivity and potential for energy related to those areas. Now, yes, you can sensitize your elbow to the point that you can have orgasm. It's actually true, and it's neat that you can do that, because people who are, for instance, paralyzed from the waist down can absolutely still learn to orgasm. You can orgasm without touching yourself at all. I teach a whole course about it, and so that was a fun thing to start to talk more publicly about. You just
And
layers and layers.
is that like the energy orgasms?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I love that too, because a lot of people feel pressure around orgasm, or like it's not as easy as they wish it was to achieve, or something may be inhibiting them from having them, even like medications or other conditions. But and honestly, sadly, I mean, a majority perhaps of women do have struggle with orgasm, or at least having it when they'd like to and as much as they'd like to, even though women or people with bodies that would be designated as female actually are designed to be really, really multiply orgasmic. So I knew right when I became aware of all that information that something was wrong. And I do really understand why that is. But let's come back to your question, which was about intention with orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
So orgasm is such a potent potential portal for unbelievable healing, unbelievable intuition and wisdom. I mean, even if you just look at the physical healing effects of orgasm, I've been gathering up a list of things I've found from articles and books, and it's about, I would say probably I have about 65 or 70 different health benefits written down. I think if
Nice.
most people really understood how beneficial it is, if it was in pill form, people would be buying it off the shelves, right? And so it's so available to us for healing. It may be that when you have an orgasm, rather than having to hold an intention sort of during or even the moment before, just the intentions that you've been holding recently. Your system, your physiology, your soul is aware of those, and it sort of can use orgasm to facilitate supportive change, nourishing energies for those intentions, helpful healing for your body and being, and heightening of your magnetism, which is a beautiful thing because it's the soul magnetism. It's drawing to you what's most of your own essence, right? Sometimes, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's like I like what you're saying, that you don't have to be thinking about your intention during orgasm, but
Yeah.
but just in the energy release itself, you're sending that vibration outward, and so then
Yeah.
it's like it'll magnetize in things that are going to align for you. So very
Yeah.
magical.
Yeah. You're accessing some of your most real, raw, authentic power and inner wisdom and inner natural intelligence of your entire being and soul. And you're really tapping right into that, and you're allowing it to do whatever would be most useful for it to do, like drinking water and then getting hydrated the way that you need to, and it happening on its own. And yeah, I just love the multi-dimensional, multifaceted benefits of sexual pleasure at all and orgasm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like a lot of women are really locked down, men probably as well, but in their pelvic area. Um, can you talk about that? Can you talk about how to release that and get that energy moving? Like,
Yeah.
what would be different ways to approach that?
Yeah. I love that because I feel that, again, still, even though sacred sexuality, which essentially just is sexuality in any person's own true experience of it, their essential experience of it from their whole being, right? It's not like there's unsacred sexuality because one couple is having sex without the right tantric position than one, But anyway, I always like to throw that out there. But so, in a lot of spiritual circles, there's still this sort of idea that the lower chakras are lower and that you don't want to come from there. And from the perspective of any ancient sexual priestess, that would sound like absolute insanity because that is the place where we are sourced with a great deal of life force. So, if we're talking about like the root chakra, we're having an amazing connection to the earth through that particular portal. And that's right at the base of the pelvis where the perineum would be, right? And so, not that it's an exact location, it can be a little different for everybody, but that's a general area. And then we move up into what would be the sexual center and up into what would be usually considered the power center or the solar plexus. But so these energies are considered like something we have to leash and rein in because they're going to do bad or they're going to make us lower or have certain hungers. Wow, the quickest way to have a real problem with those areas or to actually feel that it's out of control or too focused there is to ignore them.
Right.
And shut them down. And then they kind of have to burst out, or there's kind of a superficial focus there that doesn't really nourish the person, but they always feel sort of hungry in that way. But so since we've been told that's kind of a darker place, a place where there's more light up here somehow, and it's kind of darker and more confusing down there. The other problem with that is that that's been reaffirmed by messages that there's something wrong with our bodies or our genitals or our sexuality or masturbation or you name it. And so we have all these messages. And then if we've had any experiences that were less than beautiful that had to do with our genitals, we may feel that that's associated there. And so going there may feel like a place that maybe in a certain context we might hang out for a little bit, but not a place we would want to live from. But of course, it's kind of like saying, I just want to use one arm, but my other arm is just not as cool. I'm just going to leave that one there. And then think about what it's like if you can use both arms. So it is I love the other part of my body and those chakras, but what can happen in the pelvic area of our bodies? The energy that's generated there is unbelievable. And it's missing. I feel like a lot of people are, and there's so many reasons for this, but very low energy, really feeling kind of drained and tired. Most people, you ask them how they're doing. Not everybody, but it's kind of like, oh, I'm all right. I'm really busy, or I'm overwhelmed, or I've been tired. There's a lot of that. And if we think of the lower area, like the pelvis in our body, as being like a battery charge for us, as being a place where we connect with pure life force to then support any other areas of the body or being that then would want to blossom. So it's like if your roots aren't in the ground or in water or something, then how can the blossoms feel nourished and supported, even if you have sun and all of that? So this journey of going back into the pelvis is huge. And I really recommend having some kind of support or guidance for spending time there, because that's what I recommend most, spending time in your pelvis. And what I mean by that is actually in the right setting, when it feels okay, where you have time or a friend there, or you're taking some class or workshop that supports you in feeling like you have a framework for it. See what it's like to just put your awareness in your pelvis as if you were kind of hanging out there.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can specifically be like put your awareness in your yoni, and you see what it's like. And for some people, even if they do have great sexual experiences or something like that, it can be a little intense to just hang out there, and feelings can come up, uncomfortable feelings. But if you know they might come up, and you can kind of shift your attention if it's too much, and you know that eventually those will work their way through. So they're kind of in front of the line. If there are uncomfortable feelings related to that area of your body, they've been waiting to be felt so that they could move through.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we ultimately want to experience is flow in that part of our body, instead of, like you were saying, like kind of a feeling of stagnation. And when that area opens up and there's more natural flow, it doesn't have to feel overly open or uncomfortably open, just enough for our natural organic energy to flow through. It's really a whole different ballgame. So there are actually a lot of other things I teach about reconnecting with the pelvis, but my first thing I always start with is when it feels like a right space and a safe space, just spending some time there. And then there are things like breathing into that area before necessarily being like, okay, how can I blast off into outer space and have this great, amazing experience? To just be in your pelvis is pretty marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
And what starts to happen actually is that area of your body, which has such wisdom, right? This is where the sleeping serpent of the Kundalini is hanging out. It starts to share wisdom with you from that root place of wisdom. Like your yoni starts to tell you things about your life and what, for instance, she thinks would be great. And when you're like listening to sort of the messages or the feeling about the pulse coming from there, because we have actually a yoni pulse, a readable pulse inside the vagina. And when we're listening to that, again, whether or not we're actually feeling a pulse, it's really phenomenal what can start to happen. And so I call the yoni our other heart, because we want to be guided by the heart. We just happen to have a whole other heart that can also give us a lot of wisdom. And when we're coming from both, it's just amazing.
Interesting. It's interesting because as you're talking, I'm kind of settling in and kind of just bringing awareness to my pelvic area. And so, yeah, it's interesting the sensations that you can begin to notice as you shift your focus, instead of being kind of up in your head and in the go, 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 and you pull that energy down. Boy, you really can feel that rooting sensation, and that the more arousal, you just can kind of build that up. Yeah.
Yeah, I so much know what you mean. And I love that, if you sit on the ground, let's say you're sitting on the earth, your yoni is like on the earth. I mean, if you're sitting on the grass, like that's part of what's touching the earth. And you really sort of start to sense that ability for the pelvic area of your body to be part of your earth connection. Of course, your legs and feet as well. The whole of your body has a connection. But you sense that feeling of the root, the feeling of the root going down, or just the nourishment coming up. Mm-hmm. And you sense, oh, there's this spring, in me and in the earth, and that has to do with embodiment. I'm not just meant to be here on this earth floating alone, disconnected from my spiritual family. It's actually meant to be that I'm nourished and supported here so that I can feel spiritually connected. And that spiritual connection also is the connection to my body and the earth and this feeling of being nourished. And then we do feel more aroused, more turned on, more ignited. And that can support us. Maybe it feels overtly sexual in certain conditions and situations. And in others, it just feels like being more alive. You can be turned on about a project, about a new thing you're starting or doing. And the more support we have like that, the better,
Well, and it seems like a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs are really, they're open and expansive maybe in the upper chakras, but that whole embodiment and bringing that energy down seems so, so important.
Well, I think I totally agree with you, Angela. And I think that that's why I'm so passionate about this idea of the sexual priestess, because we actually need I hesitate to use the word teachers, and yet I think it's the best word to use, because it's really like we're helping each other remember, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we need teachers of love and that kind of wisdom of embodiment that can help us, because the world for so long has been not only not aware of this information, but really it's been actively repressed.
Mm-hmm.
And while initially it may have been actively repressed in, the interests of those who wanted to rule over the masses and have false power, and they needed to shut down the very powerfully spiritual and sexual teachers who reminded others of their own inner power. Now it's just because generation after generation, I feel like we got it from whoever passed it down to us, that it is scary to be in touch with that power, and it will just get you in trouble, or it will just whatever. And so to be reminded that this is part of our heritage as a soul and as an embodied soul, and that we have not only this place of potential sexual joy and bliss, but this nourishing, warm, loving feeling that can feel like home in our bodies, on the earth, and that can be okay and safe, not only safe, but wonderful. I think a lot of the things people are looking for sort of on a spiritual path or on a path of growth, which is wonderful, are things we experience more when we can feel embodied and connected in that way as well. Mm-hmm. Then we sort of fully come online in this experience of being alive. So I think that's why having teachers who remember and help people feel safe, even if it's not in a sexual encounter, like overtly, even if it's just someone who knows how to have a conversation with someone in a way that lets them kind of open up and blossom, that could be the thing that lets them feel more okay being in their pelvis, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, I love that you say that, though, because I think even now we have a lot of, I think there are people that are feeling that sexual energy, and then it gets misused in a way of power, and especially you see this in media, and so I think it's really important that you're talking about having teachers, because I think that gives people a framework, a feeling of safety, when you have someone helping create this this framework for you to follow, or this foundation, because this energy can feel really powerful and overwhelming, and if we don't know how to express it, or we don't know how to navigate with it, then teachers are so important.
Yeah, well, again, Angela, what you said in response just absolutely made something clarify in my mind in terms of how I wanted to say it. Because the truth is that we do totally need teachers in this world of love again. I mean, it's obvious. And it's not that there haven't been teachers of love over the centuries. And now all over the world, there are people teaching about love. I'm not saying they don't exist. But the thing is that what we really need is lovers. And while I mean that we might need actual lovers, that could be what I mean, we need people who know how to love us and remind us what that feels like. Mm-hmm. Remind us what it feels like to be loved in the places we don't feel loved. Remind us what it feels like to actually be able to reach out a hand and touch, or even say a word, and not in a way that was established by something in our past that made us think we had to be like this or like that, but actually a way that lets us authentically unfold. And so we actually need not just, let's say, a teacher, but the reason why that word had seemed uncomfortable when I said it is because we actually need someone who loves us. And that's really what these ancient sexual priestesses did all over the world, in basically every tradition in very ancient times. There were, and even less ancient times, although the traditions got much more convoluted, there were these teachers and leaders. They taught what we would think of as love and wisdom, and they were considered priestesses. But I think now we think of a priestess as someone who goes to a temple and devotes their life there, and maybe they offer some nice things or keep up the temple flame or whatever. But these women were absolutely the leaders of their time. They were considered to be what we would think of as like a ruler or a king or queen. They were also along the lines of what we think of as a chief spiritual leader of their people, really central. But they didn't rule with force ever, in the golden age that I'm talking about here, nor were they coerced. They simply radiated and remembered. And so a lot of people, there's a term sacred prostitute, that gets used as well. And a lot of people think of that as, again, sort of a woman, maybe she's in a temple. And, this tradition is not entirely exclusive to women, but generally that's, again, where I'll focus for now. And that was the main tradition that I'm accessing. And I feel like even though we all have an inner sexual healer and even all have an inner sexual priestess, the role of women right now in the world to bring this back, and not because they have to, not because this is what they must do to be of service, just because they'll be following their own joy and good stuff will happen as a result, and the world will be brought back into more harmony simply because these women are living more in alignment with what feels good and right to them. But these ancient sexual priestesses, they didn't just sort of hang out in the temple waiting for the next lover to come and show them with just the act of sex how to remember themselves. That was one way. It's a wonderful way. It's beautiful. But they could look across a room and transmit some. You could be in a room with them with their eyes closed, and they were transmitting, like many people think of from certain saints or healers. Their vibration was so powerful that they could just help you align and remember your own energy that way, or with a touch, or with energy, or with, like I said, a conversation. And so when I say we need lovers, it's people, whether or not they actually were making love to us in the traditional sense, who can love us and remind us of love in this deep, essential way that helps us to feel disarmed, because it takes so much energy to be armed. And we have lots of reasons to be. I've been through trauma myself and I totally understand. So I'm not just recommending everyone should just, disarm. But if you had reasons to feel, like slipping into a warm pool of water and just taking a deep breath because it came naturally, rather than like, okay, stand over here, now I need you to breathe. It's so different. And the sexual priestess, which we all have an inner sexual priestess, knows how to create the warm pool of water and like help someone find their own breath and their spontaneous response to things again. So, yeah.
Yeah. If only we were all tapped into that.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be. I think often we overcomplicate things. We make things hard. And this to me, in the few moments that I've experienced this, it's relaxing into the moment and relaxing into the sensuality and the fullness and the richness of the moment and life.
Yeah.
Is that
Yes, beautifully said. And I do know that, some of you are, like you just said, Angela, really you can relate to it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And you're thinking, yeah, I have that experience at least, every week at ecstatic dance or something, or when I'm with my partner or something. But some of you are like driving to work, maybe your kids are screaming, you are worried about something like taxes and something going on in your family dynamic, and you're just at the maximum and you're thinking, where does all this fit in for me?
right? Yeah,
And
it feels like a
so,
huge stretch.
yeah, like, okay, that's for when, a month from now things settle down and maybe I can have a hot bath and then I'll think about whether I can relax. And so I really feel passionate about sharing things that allow us to feel like, even in the midst of anything we might be going through, there are bridges to that place of feeling connected. I always say, for instance, even crying on the floor is better with a pillow. And I
Yes.
love to use that example because I've tried it and it is better. When I've had like a worst kind of a moment, it doesn't take away everything, but it gives there's a softness to it. And when that softness can be brought into the even painful places, and it builds. So the more we go to those places you talked about, Angela, the more we have this reservoir, the more likely we are to, it's like the pillow becomes a little more built in, and the place that we can draw from more supportive energy becomes more available to us. And the insights are a little more clear, even if the insight is, I'm not supposed to know right now. So yeah, that's what I love, is you exactly talked about it. And I'm looking at how to welcome those moments more into what we think of as, what we tend to separate from our more quote unquote spiritual lives. Like, it's spiritual when I meditate. It's not spiritual when I'm so upset in my car driving my kids to school or whatever. And if all of that can be welcomed in and there's a place for it all, wow. I mean, that's another thing that gives me chills. And there is space for that.
That's what living's all about.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So you have an awesome gift for the Academy members. Will you tell us about that, please?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. So this is one of my Sexual Priestess sessions, which is a special podcast that I do. And it's called How I Live as a Sexual Priestess. So
that's just incredible.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. It made me feel really excited because, when you can hear from someone who's saying, okay, I don't live in a temple, although my house, I enjoy it a lot and I make it temple-like, but I don't live in a temple. I have to do the kinds of things many people think of, like grocery shop and taxes and stuff like that. And yet there is this way that I can function and live as the sexual priestess and bring that into my life and come from that place and follow the pulse. And so I talk about that in the Sexual Priestess session about that is the free gift. And, there is then the component of, there are extensions of that, like how I am a sexual priestess in my sex life. And there are further discussions on all of that. But if you know sort of how to come from a sexual priestess place in general in your life, it starts to inform you about what would that mean in my relationship? What would that mean in my sexuality and how I choose to experience it or engage it? And so it just, again, it sort of blossoms out. So yeah, I was really happy to share that.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, it's like a ripple effect. Once you are able to tap into it one time and you feel it, it's like, then it's just a matter of practicing slipping in.
Yes.
I kind of get this image of the hot bath and slipping into the hot bath.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Exactly. That's exactly what I feel. We may have, I call it pleasure resistance. There are a few different terms for it. And understandably so. I also keep a list of reasons why we could have pleasure resistance. And I have like a top 20, because we're not taught that it's necessarily safe, or we may have had experiences that weren't safe, or may just not be sure it's okay to go there. But when we get over those sort of speed bumps in whatever loving, gentle way feels right in our own time, it's amazing how it becomes easier to slip into. Sort of like if we're used to meditating and we can kind of, okay, I'm on the subway, but there I am. Not like now it's all perfect and there are no thoughts, but it just feels more natural. Or if we've been working out or something and then it feels a little more natural to walk, it feels easier. We're more lifted up, as we walk, we can sense that support. So the more we do this, the more it does feel like slipping in. You're saying it exactly how I would.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a delightful conversation. And, I never know where we're going to go, where we're going to end up, but this was really fun. So thank you.
Angela, thank you. This was so much fun for me, too. I just have really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show. I hope you enjoyed today's guest and got something you can start using in your life right away. For more spiritual insights and to listen to more episodes, subscribe to The Awakened Goddess Show at theawakenedgoddess.com and discover wisdom that'll change your life.